Kip Sorensen, what's up, brother?
Good, sir. Good. Excited to get through some more questions this week. I think we may have rambled a little too much last week, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
I don't know. I think the guys, I'm not going to say they like the rambling. Actually, no, I did. Now that you say that, I saw a comment on YouTube because we're doing a lot more over there, and somebody
Yeah.
saut too much rambling or something, and you said
Too much
copy.
fluff. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said copy. I was going to say back to you, I was going to say, screw this guy, dude. For every one guy that has some negative comment, there's 100 guys who enjoy it. So just shut up and just
That's
listen or
awesome.
move along. I can't believe how many people feel the need to make negative comments, not just on YouTube, but just life in general. Like, I can't think of a time where I've disagreed with somebody on social media and I've felt the need to tell them they're wrong or they're an a-hole or I disagree with them. Like, I have too much other things to worry about than to get wrapped up in telling somebody. I just move along. That's the beauty of social media, is if you don't like what somebody has to say, you
Yeah.
just stop following them. It's not difficult.
And if
So
it was
don't
someone
so I'm
you
telling
knew,
you,
yeah,
don't take that stuff
don't
into
engage.
consideration.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, what I should have done is replied back, well, you know what? I was thinking the other day, and it just had like this huge long paragraph of understand, which was right. A lot of fluff. You get it? Well,
I get it. I wouldn't have done that though, no.
yeah, I
I'm
gotta have the
actually
time for this.
I'm actually borderline like won't look at comments anymore, except for I enjoy looking at the comments because we do get so much positive feedback and it is social media, social being the key word. And I try to be as social as possible because
Yeah.
there's a lot of guys who are listening to this podcast who support what we do and want to engage in a meaningful way. And it's just too bad you have the negative, the very few. It's usually like 1 to 2%, if that, that just I don't know, they've got it rough or something. I don't know. They've
Yeah.
had a bad life or whatever, and they're down in the dumps and they're worried about what other people are doing rather than worrying about their self.
I do think it's important to clarify though, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. If
You
you're
probably
watching,
are.
yeah, I'm sure I am. If you're watching a video, let's say that Ryan Day, or not Ryan Day, that Ryan Holiday did,
Mm-hmm.
and you had feedback, you would in that case provide feedback. Why? Because Ryan knows you. Because there is an established relationship where it makes sense for you to provide feedback. It's really from this perspective of we don't even know that individual. We don't know these individuals, and thus why would we be taking advice from someone that we have no established relationship with, or may even respect, or even know that they have expertise in that area?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that a lot. Is the idea of qualifying your sources of, we'll call it criticism or feedback. I would never take advice from a fat person on how to lose weight. I
Yeah.
would never take advice from a broke individual on how to build wealth. I would never take advice from somebody who's been divorced 3 times on how to create a sustainable marriage. Like, that's ridiculous. Now, somebody who's been fat but overcome it and figured it out, sure. Somebody who's been broke, absolutely. Somebody who's gone through a divorce but now has a thriving marriage, absolutely. But they've qualified themselves to give that advice. The other side too is, in a lot of ways, most people haven't earned the right to give you or me or even the guys listening any feedback. It's like, what gives you the right to feel like you've earned that right to give feedback, if that makes sense. And that's
Yeah.
part of the problem with social media, is that everybody has a voice, right? And we're supposed to believe this is not true, but we're supposed to believe that everybody's voice is important, or that everybody's opinion has equal weight. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. Some people's opinions don't matter. And I'm not saying that they don't have a right to say it. That's not what I'm suggesting. They have that right, but it doesn't mean I have to agree with it. That's actually one of the interesting things too I get a lot, is when I disagree with somebody, or I had made a post on Instagram the other day. I don't know if you saw this video. It was an elk that had attacked some people. They were at a state park.
Yeah.
Couple of things here. First, they're wild animals. These are not zoo animals. These are not domesticated pets. Stay away from the dang animals. Number one. Number two, there was probably half a dozen to maybe 10 dudes who just walked off. This
Yeah.
this woman was getting mauled By the way, she turned into that open guard. I don't know if you saw that,
Yeah.
but
With the
and
feet up. Yeah.
yeah, man, she potentially saved her life. But all these guys just walked away, and I criticized that. And somebody came back and said, "Well, you know, you shouldn't criticize this individual. You shouldn't judge them or anything else. And why are you chastising them? And they have a right to do that." I'm like, yeah, just because they have a right to do that doesn't mean that I'm obligated to agree with their position or their stance or their behavior. And it seems weird to me that so many people cannot separate the the idea that Americans have the right to say and do things and that I am not obligated to agree with it. Those are two separate, distinct notions, ideals.
Yeah.
So I can disagree with somebody's actions and still maintain or preserve their right to say it or do it. The national anthem is a great example. Whenever I say, somebody who isn't standing up for the national anthem is ignorant and disrespectful, I'm always met with, well, they have the right to do it. Yeah, I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that they don't have the right to do it. I'm arguing that what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
Two distinct things, but people have a hard time separating the two.
Yeah. And both of those rights are critical. The right for you to call that out and the
Yeah.
right for them to take an action against something or not to have the freedom to do what they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
And
It's
both are
interesting
equally
because
important.
I agree. We just live in this silence culture. If somebody disagrees with me, what's the quote? Never let me fall into the vulgar mistake of believing that every time somebody disagrees with me, I'm being persecuted. I slaughtered that. But
Yeah.
but that's the point. Don't fall into the trap that believing that just because somebody disagrees with you that they're persecuting you. They just disagree. That's it. And we've lost the ability to have a respectful conversation. I mean, Kip and you and I, we agree on what 95 or more percent of the things, and even the things that we disagree on. I think we we at least have some level of mutual respect, and we're trying to come to the same conclusion and get to the same place. So we have this civil discourse, even on things we disagree with. I've never once thought, well, Kip disagreed with me on that, so I guess we can't do this podcast together anymore. I guess I can't, be friends with him. And yet that is very, very common.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we think that that's effective, that if you go around and you bulldoze people and you silence them with your disagreement and they just never rebuttal, that's actually healthy. That's actually good for them.
Yeah,
like,
I won.
Yeah,
no,
exactly. Well, and I was having this conversation. I mean, even just with my kids is like, just the other day, Kiave was upset with something. His mom asked me to do something. He was kind of upset about it. And he kind of had attitude about it. I'm like, okay, let's address this. Number one, you need to control your emotions and not have an attitude. Mm-hmm. Second, I want to be really clear. I don't want you just to walk away and do what we asked. If you're upset, you need to pause and go, hey, in a calm way, I disagree with this, or I don't understand why this is important and it's making me upset about this. Can I get clarity? And then you can get on the same page with us, understand where the request is coming from, and address whatever internal dialogue you're having about the request that made you upset. Because it's equally not good for me as a parent for my kids just to, yes, sir, do it. And then meanwhile, they're walking off completely pissed off because what am I teaching them? Right? Be silent. Don't have open communication with something. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, no, I don't want that, because how they deal with me and how they deal with their mom is how they're going to deal with their spouses. And we've talked about this so many times. That's not beneficial in a marriage, right? If your wife is bulldozing you or your husband is bulldozing you and you're just silencing, going on your merry way, but meanwhile, you're sabotaging the relationship and you're upset and you're having covert contracts because you disagree with something that you're unwilling to communicate about.
100%, man. It's absolutely right.
We'll just keep riffing, man. We don't even need questions.
Screw questions, man. We can come up with better topics on our own. No,
Friday.
I mean, let's get to the questions. All right, we've officially burned up 10 minutes now. So
it's our tradition,
guys. Let's get into. Well, usually we don't go for 10 minutes. We usually go for 5. But guys, let's get to your questions. You're important too. So let's get to what you have to say. We'll do our best to answering these questions. Are they coming from Facebook or the Iron Council
All
today?
all Facebook today. That's
All
Facebook.
Facebook today.
Yep.
All right.
Facebook.com/group/order of man if you want to join us there.
Yeah, and based on the caliber of question, we'll let you know if you're ready for the Iron Council.
Each guy we're like, copy, check.
You're in.
Yeah.
You may request access.
Yeah, which is something we've talked about, limiting the membership in the IC and kind of making that a little bit more exclusive. So keep that in mind, guys. All right, Greg Emerson, we spend a lot of time working on the father-son relationship. How would you recommend dealing with a difficult mother-son relationship? My mother and I have a tough time with the simplest things: communication, understanding, and not being frustrated. Talking directly to her about our issues has not been fruitful either. My dad and I are in agreement about the issues, but he isn't exactly helpful either. Do you have any recommendations?
I mean, I don't know how old this guy is, but
Yeah.
I mean, you're probably at a point where, you do the best you can and make the best of the situation and be cordial. Maybe there's some topics and some conversations that are off limits. Look, man, it's not your job to save her. It's not your job to rescue her. It's not your job to even point out where she's wrong or how she could do life better. Now, if she's asking you for that information, then I would say go ahead and share it. But outside of that, you're a grown man. She's a grown woman, I assume. So let her live her life. You live your life. Your dad is a grown man. He can figure it out, the dynamic and the relationship with his wife, your mother. It's not your place. So have the best conversations that you can. Love your mother. Be engaged with her to the degree that you want and can. If there's certain topics that can't be broached because it turns into an argument or a knockout, drag down fight, and just leave it alone. Like, what's the point? There's no point to getting into that argument, and it's not even your place to do it. So I would say disengage from the things that aren't worth getting into. I mean, not everything is your battle, and you don't have to die on every hill. Like, choose your battles wisely. And this is a battle that frankly may not be worth fighting.
Yeah. John Gary Bishop in his last book, and he talked about it on the podcast. I can't remember the episode, but just the power and the detriment of expectation. You obviously have some strong expectation on your mom. Oh, she should do X. She should be this way. Why?
Why should she? Yeah. She doesn't owe you anything, and you don't owe her anything.
Exactly. Like, let go of the expectation and maybe just love her the way she is. Now, you don't have to agree with it. We talk about this all the time. You don't have to agree. You don't have to choose to engage, but you can also just realize that that's just kind of the way she is.
Right.
And stop making her wrong so much. But
right.
All right, Dallin Edwards, if I already have a group of people that keep me accountable and I push myself pretty hard goal-wise, is there a reason to join the Iron Council?
You're asking because you're missing something.
Yeah.
If you weren't missing something, you wouldn't be asking this question. So what are you missing?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't answer that question because I don't know what he's missing. I could look. This is a lesson for all of our sales guys and our marketers here. Okay. There's a great book called The Selling Chronicles, and it's directed more towards the financial planning, financial services industry. But the whole premise of the book is don't sell. Don't sell. Don't chase. Don't sell. That's not your job. You let people tell you why they should work with you. So this is a lesson for our marketers, for our sales guys. What's this gentleman's name?
Dallin.
Dallin, I'm not going to convince you to join the Iron Council because I don't care if you join the Iron Council. And I know that sounds maybe a little rough, maybe a little harsh. I would love for you to be part of the Iron Council, but whether you join us or not doesn't affect me. Yeah. So you need to answer the question of what you're missing. What are you missing? If you have guys in your community and you have the accountability and the brotherhood and you're being pushed and you're pushing as hard as you can, then the answer is most certainly no. You don't need the Iron Council. But it's a pretty good indicator that something is off, that there's something lacking in your own life. Otherwise, you wouldn't be asking the question. So answer that question. What do you want? And then if I know what you want, I can tell you whether or not we may be able to provide solutions to that. But I'm not going to jump to conclusions, and I'm not going to sell you on all the benefits of joining the Iron Council. I'm not going to do that for anybody. So you let me know what it is that's missing, and I'll tell you if we can fill it or not.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I run into that all the time from a work perspective, that all I do is present opportunity and possibility. And then it's up to the client to decide, is like, yeah, that's applicable or that would benefit us. But that's not my call. That is their call, not mine.
Right.
All
Right.
I do is present the art of the possible.
And we have to assume that Dallin and your potential clients and my other potential clients are adults that are rational and capable of making decisions that are going to be in their best interest.
Yeah, totally.
So if somebody says, no, I'm not going to join the Iron Council, then I have to assume that that individual is making a rational, conscious decision that is in his best interest. If he is joining the Iron Council, then I'm going to assume that he's making a rational decision because he feels like joining the Iron Council will be in his best decision. I'll present what we have available. I'll present what good I think it's going to do, but I'm not going to convince anybody to be part of anything that I'm doing, whether it's buying a shirt or a wallet or joining the Iron Council or coming to one of our events or even listening to this podcast. I would love you to. I'm honored when people do, but it doesn't affect me one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, it's not our problem if you're not manning up and wearing Iron Order of Man gear. I mean, that's your problem.
That's on you. And you're going to get less promotions, less women, less sexual encounters. You're probably not going to be as strong
or happy
or fulfilled if you're not wearing Order of Man merchandise. But you make your decision, whatever you want to do.
Your call.
The point that I'm making here is, you let me know what you feel like you're missing, and I'll be clear with you whether we can fill it or not. I mean, I've told guys like, hey, based on what you're asking or looking for, the Iron Council's not a fit. I had a call with a gentleman, it must have been about 2 weeks ago, who wanted to do some individual coaching. And I said, no, I'm not your guy. Like, what you're looking for, I don't think you need personal coaching from me. You don't need that from me. I mean, he would have paid me. I could have told him that I could have solved all his problems, but I don't need to sell. I don't want to sell. I don't want to convince people. And I certainly don't want to offer things that aren't going to be in people's best interest.
Yeah, because it's not in your best interest in that same exact case, right? It's best for both parties.
Not because, I mean, yes, you're correct that it's not in my best interest to have people it's not in their best interest, but that's not why I do it. Yeah. That just happens to be the case.
Yeah, totally. All right, John LaRussa, my triangle choke sucks. Quick tips.
My triangle choke is non-existent, so I can't answer that question. I mean,
you never go
I know when people get me in it, and I just kind of flail around and try not to get strangled, but I can't give any pointers here.
You're not working it?
Well, yeah, but of course, I'm always constantly trying to work on it, constantly trying to improve. When people get me in a move or a hold or a submission attempt, I'm evaluating, okay, what is it that they're doing to me? If I move this way, what's that going to do? The other day, he's a brown belt, and he was on my back, and he had one arm around my neck, but I had my hand in there between his arm and my neck, so I was well defended. And I felt fairly comfortable, just because I've been in that position quite a bit now, that like he's not gonna choke me out this way.
Yeah.
So I just maintained and tried to move and work a little bit. And he put his other hand in front and he put it really close. And I was like so tempted to grab it, so tempted. I'm like, man, I'm not gonna grab that arm. And the time expired and we stopped, and he just laughed. He's like, man, you didn't go for that bait. And I'm like, yeah, because if I did, I would have let go of your arm. He's like, that's what I was hoping you would do. Yeah. So I didn't. I felt good about that. So I'm consciously trying to decide, okay, what is this individual doing? Like, if I see something that's too easy, I'm like, red flag. Fishy. What's going on here? So, that's funny. You have some pointers, I'm sure.
Yeah, so on the triangle choke, for the non-jiu-jitsu guys, the triangle choke is using your legs, and they call it a triangle choke because it kind of creates a triangle with your legs. And what you're doing is your thigh is actually cutting off blood flow to one side of the neck, and the person's arm is engaged with the head, right? So imagine
Kind
if
of like
someone's
shoulder, right? Like
yeah,
almost like
imagine
squished.
like your head and your arm is being vice gripped by someone's legs. And I'm leaving out tons of detail here. But regardless, what's happening is your legs choking one artery, and then their shoulder is being smashed into their neck, and that's what's getting the other choke. So depending on your body type, some guys with really long legs sometimes struggle with a triangle choke because there's a lot of space in there. And so what I would try to do is focus on trying to finish the choke without using your hands and without using your head. And the key thing is
Your head or their head?
their head. Don't use your
Right.
hands to pull
To
their
pull
head down.
down. Right.
You should be able to get that choke without doing that.
I
And
can't do that actually.
not
I
at
have
all.
no, because I have such short legs. It's
Legs. Yeah.
difficult for me to wrap my leg around their head and arm without either grabbing my own leg or foot or their head to pull them in closer.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is still very normal. Guys will do that a lot and control the one ankle, right? To tighten it up and
Sure.
get things tight. But what I would focus on is collapsing the triangle. So if you actually just do the movement and then collapse and try to bring your knees together and make sure that you're looking down the guy's ear. So you're not facing them. You're actually off to the side of them, and you're looking into the ear, and you're collapsing your knees together. That's
And
where
you're
the
looking
actual
at
choke will come.
and you're looking at their ear with the side that does not have the
Not the
shoulder in
arm.
it.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And just focus on squeezing your knees together. Also, another thing to keep in mind is you might want to bridge. Make sure to bring that arm all the way across, make sure it's deep. But the key thing is about bringing those knees together. You can actually finish that choke even without the triangle, the legs being locked together, just by bringing those knees together. So I really focus on that more than anything else.
One thing, those are good tips. One thing I would say, for what it's worth, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can correct it here, Kip, if I'm wrong too, is when I was training last week, I was in closed guard and then I went to open guard and I wanted to try this triangle. So I went to a spider guard and I slipped my right foot behind the guy's head and slipped my left foot from the spider guard under his right arm. And I went for that triangle. And the thing that I missed, and this might be a pointer because I recognized it, is I didn't have a good grip of his right arm that I was trapping, and I didn't pull it up towards me. So he was able to back out of it really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So when you slip your legs, you've got to, and you were talking about that, pull them in deep, right? With their sleeve or however you have their arm, pull them in deep while you're slipping your legs into that triangle.
Yeah. And maybe said another way is just control their posture. If you break their posture, often we'll throw that triangle together, but we don't control their posture, and they'll just posture up and break out of it really quick.
Right.
So the more you can control their posture and break their posture down, you can take your time and keep it locked in, use your arms and everything else without being concerned about losing that triangle choke.
How do you avoid getting stacked up on a triangle? Like if you're going for a triangle, how do you avoid getting stacked up? Is that going off to the side and looking into their ear? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. If you stay off to that side, you're gonna prevent the stack. The other thing to keep in mind too, from an MMA perspective, guys will look to elevate and slam. That's why when you go off to the side, that usually makes one of those legs available. So you can underhook one of the legs with your arm, and that prevents them from lifting you. And you can eventually possibly get a sweep out of it and then finish the triangle choke from on top.
Yeah, which I have been choked out in a triangle from mount, as in I'm mounted, and the guy slid up and put me in a triangle when he was in my mount, or he was mounted on me, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
So yeah,
extra humiliating to
totally
try and
completely, because you're like flailing around and there's nothing you can do, and his balls are in your face, and
it's like teabagging your face as you're getting choked.
Yeah. What? So in jiu-jitsu, can I lift somebody up and slam them on the ground?
Depends on the tournament, right? So this past weekend was ADCC. If you guys want to see like some of the most amazing no-gi jiu-jitsu on the world, get the replays of ADCC. It just amazing, just
I saw
amazing
some on
jiu-jitsu.
Instagram this morning.
Yeah. Elevated slams are completely allowed, right, in that tournament. If you look at IBJJF rule set, you can't do elevated slams. You can do judo throws, but you can't
I was
like,
just going to ask a throw,
yeah,
but in this case, I couldn't pick somebody up out of
and
a
just
triangle
slam.
position, just body slam them to the ground.
No,
They'd let
I've
go
even,
for sure.
yeah, I've even gotten in trouble in tournaments where the guy was in my guard and I kind of postured up and they came up off the ground and I pushed them down just from off my knees and I got
Oh,
warnings for that. Yeah.
interesting.
So they're
Hmm.
really careful about kind of slamming
Yeah.
people because they don't want people getting knocked out and whatever.
Yeah. Lame.
Sensitive. I know. I'm
Weak.
just joking. I'm grateful for that stuff, man. If you think about going like absolute no weight limit against a big guy that's possible
Oh, dude.
wrestler, I'm like, oh, please no high elevated slams,
Yeah.
like because you can get hurt real easily. So,
Yeah, for sure.
all
All
right,
right. Let's move on.
Josh Hatcher. I just had a good friend commit suicide in front of his wife and his daughter. I'm making a point to reach out to all my friends that might be struggling with thoughts like that. What would you say if a friend was thinking about offing himself? For clarification, I'm not thinking about it myself. I typically can't even fathom the idea, which is why I ask, so that maybe I can get in some better ideas on how to help others.
I don't know, man. I'm not real qualified to talk about this. It is hard for me to think that somebody would be in that position. I imagine there's a time where you probably ought to bring it up very directly. And I also imagine there's probably a time where you shouldn't bring it up directly, that you should just be a friend. You know,
Yeah.
if it's you, Kip, and I notice you going down a dark path, or I'm having this feeling about you and where you're at, man, I just might call you up and say, hey, do you want to go train? Or you want to go lift? Hey, I'm going to go shoot. I'm going to do, maybe shooting's not the right thing, but you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go out and hey, I'm going out with the guys. We're going golfing. We're going hunting, whatever the thing is. Hey, maybe you have to put together a guys night and it's, UFC fight night. And we've done this. You and I have done this
Yeah.
before. And, we get a group of us together and we don't talk about suicide and depression. And we just watch the fights and we jack jaw and we give each other a hard time and we have fun and we eat some good food and we just watch the fights. So look, this is a problem. It really is. And it's hard for me to be empathetic towards this problem of suicide because I've never been there. I've been in some dark times, but never once have I seriously given any thought to leaving this world. So it's hard for me to understand, but I know it's real. I know it's legitimate. I know there's mental health issues. I know it's easy for men to fall into depression at times and feel alone and in a dark place. And the best thing I think you can do is to make sure these individuals are not alone, make sure they feel welcomed and part of the group, and make sure that they know that they have your support and your friendship. And sometimes that means you just going out and grabbing a burger or a beer. And other times it means you need to have a real serious conversation about what's going on and what's happening.
Yeah.
This
So,
actually goes back, Kip, to one of the things that we talked about earlier too, is we talked about earning the right to give feedback and criticism.
yeah.
If you're reaching out to a stranger, the likelihood that you will have an impact is going to be significantly diminished. But Kip, if I reach out to you or you reach out to me because one of us are going through a dark time, we've done a lot of work. I mean, we've known each other for years. And so if you reached out with something that was concerning you, or I reached out about something that was concerning me, there's so much more weight behind you reaching out to me as opposed to a stranger. So the point that I'm making here for Josh is if you've got guys in your circle, include them always in your circle and the things that you're doing so that if something ever goes down, or if you ever need some help, that there's people who have your back, they're in your corner, they know you, they're familiar with you, they've built up a lot of emotional and human and connection capital, if you will. And I just think it'll have more weight when you do it that way.
Yeah. We talk about the idea of the power of a lighthouse and sharing yourself with people. And me personally, there's been a couple times, and this is tough, by the way. This isn't even advice. This is just my take on this a little bit. But sometimes you want to be a hard ass with them, hey, get out of your funk, and maybe be tough love because you think that might be what they need. But you can totally look at that scenario and say, well, that could completely backfire, right? And maybe that's not what they need, and maybe they need someone to be sensitive or whatever. But one thing I am for sure about, that if I know someone that's kind of down and out a little bit, and I actually go out and we rub shoulders with each other, we spend some time together, and if I want to have that kind of conversation, that I actually share something that I'm struggling with them. That's powerful because they can't argue with it. It's not an attack on them, but you're opening up. You're making that conversation possible, and you're presenting something that they can consider for themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah. I just think that's really, really powerful, especially for some of the guys that I've had communications with that are on the depression side. Hearing other guys talk about what they did to help with their depression was really powerful. And so maybe just you sharing might be exactly what is needed as well.
Yeah, that's a great perspective for sure.
All right, John Wesley Terry, besides Jesus, who is one man that you think really encompasses your view on being a man? He's making a huge assumption there, but I'm just
lightning strikes right in this case. Yeah, not my home, your home. You're the one that said it.
That's why I'm not home.
Yeah, I mean, he's right in that assumption for sure. I would say two men that I really admire based on what I've read. It's hard because all men have flaws, and so it's easy to say, well, did you know this about this guy if you say something?
Yeah, like if they're historical figures.
Right.
Yeah.
But I look at men like Theodore Roosevelt, George Washington, even modern times. I look at an individual like Jocko Willink as somebody I really admire and respect for who he is and what he stands for, how he shows up. So yeah, I mean, these are men, they have flaws and they have areas where they fall short, but on the whole, and what I know about these individuals, they espouse the virtues that I, in my own life, want to espouse and want to strive for and be like. So there's three examples for you.
Yeah. I love
and
it.
Look, here's the other thing too. This is a weird scenario, but it'll make sense when I wrap this all up. When I was it must have been 5th or 6th grade, I remember seeing this girl, and it's going to sound really bad, seeing this girl, and she was, I don't know, in some sort of assembly or something at school, and I saw her, and I'm like, man, she is really ugly. Like, I remember thinking that.
You're right. This does sound bad.
It sounds bad, I know, but bear with me on this, because that's what my thought was. Is like, man, she is really ugly, and I didn't say anything about it. I didn't do anything about it. That was my thought. And I remember vividly. So 6th grade, I must have been, 11 years old? So that's 27 years ago. I remember vividly in the next breath thinking, Ryan, how dare you say that? How dare you say that? And instead, I listened to her. I can't remember if she was giving a talk or maybe some sort of talent show or something. And I just remember whatever it was she did, I was so impressed with what she did. And I was in 6th grade.
Yeah.
And it was a lesson for me that you just really ought to be careful about speaking negatively and ill of people. And the reason I bring this up is because I adopted at that age in my life that there's good in all people, there's bad in all people. There's things that you can look at in everybody that will help you. I look at the situation with my dad. It would be easy for me to be bitter and have resentment and animosity. I don't at all. I think my dad was a good human being. I think he made some mistakes. I think if I were to ask him that he would agree to that. I've made mistakes, certainly in our relationship. But there was a lot of good in him too. He was a hard worker. People loved him. Man, they loved him. He worked at paint stores and He was so meticulous about his job. Somebody could bring in like a piece of wallpaper, for example, and he would look at the color and he could match it, just identically match it just by looking at it.
Yeah.
He was so meticulous about that. And his customers absolutely loved him, and he's so good at that. And there's a lot of good in him. Very, very talented, very creative, could draw so well. And the point I'm making here, I'm going to try to wrap this up, but the point I'm making here is that we don't need to look for the superhero. All right? Superheroes don't exist. All men have flaws. All men have problems. We all have negative attributes. We all have a tendency and a propensity for violence and less virtuous activity, but we also all have a lot of good. So I'm not saying you need to be blind to the bad, but if you just spend a little time thinking about what you can extract from people, you can find positive role models and positive examples in every single human being that you meet. I don't care who it is, every single human being that you meet. And I choose to look at it like that because I learned that lesson in 6th grade that you don't need to rush to the negative so quickly. And you probably ought to look for what's good, and you might just find it.
Yeah. You've answered similar questions in the past, and I've always been impressed with this response. I've heard this response before. It's like, I look to guys in the Iron Council. I look to my friendships. I look to my wife's dad. You find the good and the great example, and you look for evidence of how to become a better man through multiple facets, right? Not just George Washington or particular individuals. And man, I totally agree. And it's funny because I never thought of it that way. And I've used to have that complaint when I think about this question, even when I was a little kid and people would say, oh, who's your hero or whatever. I was constantly like, no one. Like, I don't know the person. And I always struggled with the whole Jesus thing because I was like, well, yeah, but like, I'm not going to quit my job and go around and start preaching gospel. So that's hard for me to relate to him, And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but we can relate to a lot of different people in different ways. And,
Right.
and I've always appreciated that viewpoint that you've always had. So,
yeah, I mean, I've got two great neighbors, and most people wouldn't know them, wouldn't think anything of them. They're very unassuming, but they're men. The one down the road, he raises his family. It's obvious that he loves his family, that his kids love him. He's engaged with them. He's one of the hardest working men that I've ever seen. I mean, he's got energy for days. I don't know how he does it, but it's absolutely incredible. He volunteers on the fire force here, the fire department here. I mean, he's amazing, but he's also average in a lot of ways too. And I don't say that negatively. I say that he's like you and me, but he's amazing. Yeah. And then I've got another neighbor right across the street here. He's become more like grandpa than he has a neighbor. And I went over there a couple of months ago because I had to put a post office box in there, or excuse me, a mailbox in there. And I brought my mailbox over and I had a shovel, and he's like, hey man, what are you doing with that shovel? And I said, well, I'm going to dig a hole so I can put this mailbox in here. He's like, I remember, he's like, no neighbor of mine is going to dig a hole with a shovel when I have a perfectly good backhoe right here. And he brought it out and he dug a hole and he helped me level it and get it straight. And while I was, filling the hole, he had brought this toy out that was his son's or his grandson's, and he fixed it so my 3-year-old could ride around on it while we were working on this. There's examples, endless examples of what we would consider quote unquote ordinary, everyday, average guys who are man's men. And that's what we ought to strive to be like. It's a shame because we look at athletes and we look at movie stars and we look at Instagram celebrities and we put these men on pedestals that frankly they don't belong. Some people do it to me, and they think that I am the epitome of everything manly and virtuous, and I'm not. Like I fail all the time. I fall short all the time of the things that I want to accomplish. So be careful of placing anybody on a pedestal and just look for the examples where they are and just strive to be a better man than you were yesterday.
Yeah. I love that, man. I have a neighbor that's like my daughter's grandpa, 2 houses down, and they write him letters. Like the other day he came over and he had this whole bag of love notes that my daughters have written him with the neighbor girls.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they call him
That's awesome.
Cookie. They call him Cookie Grandpa, and he just comes over and he's like tearful, and he's just like, I love those girls so much, and they're so kind to me. And so he wrote his own letter back to them. You know what I mean? He drops it
Yeah.
off, and it's those things that are so much more impactful, right? They don't have the glamour,
That's the
but it's
shame.
yeah, and it's unfortunate. Yeah,
It is, because it's the guy who works a few more hours because he needs to put food on his table, or the man that stays up late and helps his son with the math problems that he can't get, or the guy who spends all weekend at his daughter's dance or cheerleader recital and is miserable but there to support. It's like,
yeah,
that's, man, that's what it means.
yeah,
That's what it means. That's what it
yeah,
means to be a man, and it just doesn't get recognized and rewarded enough.
yeah. All right, Brian Grogan, what what one thing are you working on this year to make your family more prepared for uncertain times?
So Brian's an Iron Council. This comes off the back, I imagine, of our topic in the Iron Council on being prepared.
Yeah,
So, what one thing? Food storage is really the biggest for us right now. We're really, really working on getting our food storage where it needs to be and getting everything in place and making sure that we have adequate food storage set aside, because we left and lost. I was going to say lost. We didn't lose it. We left a lot of it in Utah when we came out. In fact, we gave it to a bunch of our friends because we didn't want to bring it across the country.
yeah,
So we gave it to our friends, and hopefully they enjoy it. And so we have to rebuild that up. Really spending a lot of time in the woods with my two oldest boys, on the property specifically, and we're hunting turkeys right now. I think, let's see, archery season for deer opens in, I think, a day or two as of the release of this podcast. So we'll be doing that. But that's a big thing too, is learning how to hunt. We found, in exploring, we found a game trail that is evident. That's where they're spending most of their time and coming through. So those are a couple of things that we're working on right now.
that's cool.
Yeah, man, it's fun.
I got a tip from my mom actually, so props to her for this. And it was really because we were having some trimmers here up in northern Utah. It was earlier this year, and it's kind of causing everyone to think a little bit in regards to
Oh,
my
I misunderstood. You said tremors. Is that right?
yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah. No, I just misunderstood.
And so it just got us thinking about, I have a brick home, and so if my home goes collapsing and the food storage is downstairs in the basement, like this may be a difficult thing to get to. What if we need to leave or exit? And so I'll share my mom's advice to me is getting a large trash can on the side of the house with the other trash cans, and it actually has a lock on it. And inside that trash can is kind of our family's bug out.
Hmm.
Extra clothes, sleeping bags, food, water. It's on two wheels. So worst case scenario, I can drag that sucker around. Of course, it's going to be in the heat all summer long, so I can't put anything in there that's going to be perishable.
Sure.
But it's a great idea, and it just
Yeah.
sits on the side of the house, and we keep it locked. And so I actually got that trash can. We haven't filled it up yet, and so we're going to get the kids to grab a pair of clothes that fits currently and that they don't want, and we're going to start kind of packing that up and
Yeah.
prepping that.
It's
So,
perfect. I love it. Great idea.
all right, Teddy Stubblefield. After following your page and listening to the podcast, I've wondered, do you ever intend to try traditional archery? I've shot bows on and off all my life, and bow hunting on and off for 10 to 12 years. I've always found satisfaction in shooting long bows and recurves, but felt more confident in hunting with a compound. And he actually has another question about, have you ever considered venturing outside of the world of BJJ?
So somebody asked me this on Instagram yesterday, and my simple answer right now is no. I say right now because that may change. I'm open to checking these things out. The reason I say no right now is because I'm learning to get better at saying no.
Yeah.
So compound bow is significantly easier. It's more precise. It's easier to learn, I think. There's a lot more to it. It's more complex in a lot of ways, but it's more accurate. You can dial it in. You make longer shots. Like, it's just the way it is. Uh, so people have asked me about a traditional bow. I mean, maybe, but right now I don't have no, I'm going to say it this way. Not that I don't have. I am not going to take the time and invest the resources into learning another thing. Same thing with jujitsu. I could take up boxing or Muay Thai or MMA or whatever, something else, but I'm just not going to right now because I'm not going to spend the resource and the capital in learning a new skill at this stage in my life.
Are the interests there for you though?
Oh, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I love trying new things. I love exploring and expanding and pushing beyond my current capabilities. But right now, I feel like I really want to get better at jujitsu and I want to get better at archery with a compound bow. And so those are my emphasis and those are my focuses. And I'm just not willing to invest time in other places at this stage of my life.
All right, Mike Anderson, as a paramedic, I utilize Jocko Willink's prioritize and execute, detach yourself, stop, look around, and make a decision. How can I most effectively utilize these practices in my personal life?
Um, well, just do it. Like I don't.
Yeah, maybe
When
he's
you
looking for an example of where those are applicable in people's personal lives, maybe.
the thing that works best for me, I'll tell you, is I tend to get, well, we've talked quite a bit about impatience. I tend to find myself when I'm impatient getting emotional and letting like anger or frustration vent out with particularly my family. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I've learned to detach. I've learned to disengage from the situation by being aware of what's happening. This is why the after action review is so critical, because if you're going throughout your day and you realize, man, I really exploded with my son today and I didn't want to do that and I handled that incorrectly in evaluating your day, then you can start asking yourself, why did that happen? What led to those events? How are you going to make sure you fix this and not do this moving forward? And then you start to realize that in my particular case, that, oh, well, the reason I got upset with him is because I didn't give myself enough time or space or margin for this next activity. And I was down with something at work and that spilled over here. And the best way for me to overcome that now is to disengage.
Mm.
Disengage for a minute. If I feel myself welling up and getting frustrated or allowing my emotions to boil over when they shouldn't, then I disengage as politely and respectfully as I can. I can't talk about this right now. I can't do this right now. I am going to come back to it. Give me some time and some space. I detach, physically detach from the environment because I can feel myself heating up. I could probably look in the mirror and see myself getting red, but I disengage and then I get back into the thing. Same thing probably happens at work. Same thing happens with, my wife at times and kids. And this after action review is a critical component of my day because I realize where I'm falling short and what I can do to get better. The other thing I would say, and this actually ties into what we were talking about earlier with trying the longbow and different forms of martial arts. Somebody had posted uh, on Instagram again about me trying new things, and then he said, how do you juggle everything that you have going on? Like, I feel like I have so many plates in the air, and how do I juggle all of it? I said, stop juggling so many plates.
Yeah.
Who told you you have to juggle everything? Put a few plates down that aren't important or aren't relevant and just juggle the ones that are important and relevant to you based on your goals and objectives. And that leads into what we're talking about here is detach yourself from the obligation that you feel like you have to do everything and so much. This is part of the great conversation I had with Ryan Holiday earlier in the week, or yesterday, I guess, as of the release of this podcast. He wrote a book called Stillness is the Key.
Great
And
episode, by the way.
yeah, I mean, it was a
It was good.
powerful conversation with him. And he talked about why we need to learn to be more still. And we live in a society that prides itself on being busy and consumed and entertained and never quiet, never alone, never without anything to do. And so is it really any wonder why we're so upset and why we're so on edge and why we're always so stressed out? Because we haven't learned to detach ourselves. So I would say that's the path that I've taken as far as how do you learn to detach? You do it. You exercise those principles. You put the cell phone down. You remove yourself from the environment that's making you frustrated. You evaluate constantly about what's working and what isn't, and then come up with courses of action to improve yourself.
Yeah. I think the opportunities to utilize those for Mike are everywhere. Everything
Oh,
from
absolutely.
projects at the house, prioritizing what you need to work on, to tough conversations where your egos maybe get in the way. Like for me, when I think of detached, that's usually what the detachment is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Is if I'm upset at my kid, it's because I've added meaning to it, right? Negative meaning. I'm mad because of how it reflects to me or something else. And we talked about this, I think, Ryan, last week about the value of in those circumstances being able to sit back and say, what does that child need from me?
Mm-hmm.
Not what I need or addressing my concerns or anything else. And to do that, you have to detach yourself from the situation and say, okay, this isn't about me. What does Ian need in this conversation? What do I need to implement to help him, and remove yourself from the equation?
Yeah.
And to stop and look around, man, that's my number one problem at work, to be honest with you. It's I have a tendency to get into the projects and be getting in the weeds. And lately I've been actually considering, like, man, I need to stop more, look around, prioritize, and look at what's going on with my team, make sure I'm supporting them and that they have the guidance and direction that they need. I can't do that for my family. I can't do that for my team if my head is in the trenches and I'm just busy getting work. I can't lead and guide from that position. And so that opportunity shows up all the time. And the analogy we used last week was hiking, right? Is if you don't look up and look at the horizon and realize that you're not going west and you just have your head down looking at the trail, you're going to get off target. And you need to stop, look up, and determine and orient yourself of where you're at currently from a bigger picture of things. So
Yep. Yep. I like it. The other thing I would suggest here is Cal Newport. I've done a couple of podcasts with him. He has some great work on what he calls deep work. Like Cal doesn't even have social media accounts because he knows how much time that takes and how consuming it is. So read Deep Work by Cal Newport. Listen to the podcast. The other thing that I wrote down here as notes when you were talking about attaching meaning to it. Here's a great example. Have you ever woken up after a long night's rest and you had a dream about your wife doing something that you didn't like? For example, maybe in your dream your wife cheated on you, and you woke up and you were pissed at her for the entire day or longer. She didn't even do anything. It's you projecting what you think maybe she did without ever having any real context to it, and then it ruins your day and it has nothing to do with her at all.
Yeah.
This is a great example of the meaning that we give to things and then how it affects us. There's a misconception about emotions in men, and I think there's on the spectrum there's two schools of thought. One school of thought is this. I think it's more of a new aged feel good kind of notion that we are to be in tune with our emotions and be vulnerable at all times and express who we are and all of our faults and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't entirely believe that. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other side of it is that we're supposed to show no emotions, never be emotional, completely detached from everything and everybody, and just be this robot. Okay, well, it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? Look, guys, emotions aren't bad. If they were bad, then you wouldn't have evolved to have emotional responses to outside circumstances. You wouldn't have. Nature would have done away with that millions and millions of years ago if it didn't serve you in some way. So the idea is not to suppress your emotion. The idea is to understand your emotion. If you're angry about something, figure out why you're angry and if it's justified, and start coming up with reasons or ways to solve the problem. So we'll go to the dream thing. If you're angry because your wife cheated on you in a dream, why don't you go talk with your wife and work through it, and everything will be fine. You won't be angry anymore, right? If you're upset with your child because your child did or did not do X, Y, and Z, maybe being angry is actually warranted.
Yeah.
Maybe you should be angry. Now, the way you express the anger or the frustration or the disappointment, it is something that you need to reconsider. But there are no negative emotions. There are no negative emotions. All of them are simply there to serve you, to teach you, to guide you, and instruct you on the correct path moving forward away from that negative response that you're having.
Yeah. It's how you
That's the idea
handle
of
them. Yeah.
stoicism. A lot of people think, oh, stoicism is about suppressing emotions. No, it isn't.
Not even
Stoicism
close.
is about
Yeah.
understanding your emotions and then doing what is within your control, your response to the emotion so that you can make your life better.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a couple more.
All right. When's the follow-up to sovereignty dropping?
I
Oh,
don't know.
Chad Hulsley. Sorry.
Chad. I don't know, Chad. I'm writing the manuscript for the next book. I'm not going to disclose too much right now because I've got some multiple different directions and I'm kind of at a crossroads here on which way I want to go. I don't particularly enjoy the writing process, so that makes it more difficult. So I don't know. I don't know. But
Okay.
thank you for the question and the vote of confidence. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. Kyle Shields, have you ever experienced tension or jealousy between you and another less secure man? How can you diffuse that tension? Thanks, guys.
Tension or oh, I don't care. Like if let's just Kip, if you're jealous of me or whatever,
I am.
well, I don't care.
Let's address this.
Cool. That's your problem, not mine. What do you want me to do about it? Like,
Yeah,
mate, do you want me to perform less so that you feel more comfortable or you're not as jealous of me? Like,
or blow smoke up. You know what I mean?
right.
Make
What do
me
you
feel
want me to
better.
It's not
Yeah.
my job to make you feel good about who you are and yourself and all that you have and everything else. I don't care. I can't envision a point or a relationship where it would be my obligation for you not to feel more secure with yourself.
How's this
Well,
though?
I would say, let me back up. I would say with my kids, like my son, my oldest son, for example, he's got some confidence issues. He's more timid. He's more insecure in a lot of ways. He's he's worried about his weight at times. And it's my job to help coach him through that so that he can be strong and independent and place his own thoughts about himself as a priority over what other people think of him.
Yeah.
But outside of that sort of relationship, it's not my job to make you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. Here's a little detail, right? In the question, he says the last portion of his question is, how can you diffuse that tension? Maybe perhaps, Kyle, that you have tension, right? With the fact that this quote unquote less secure man is jealous of you and that bothers you. That you can address. Now, you can't change him and you can't make him more secure, but you can still take ownership with the quote unquote tension that you might have towards him and how you're making him wrong about, I don't know, being jealous and whatever. And so you can address that internal dialogue that you have and make sure that you're clear from your perspective. But when it comes to addressing his issue, the other guy's issue, obviously, I don't think there's much you can do there.
And it's not even your obligation or
Yeah.
place to do it. Let's flip this one on its head a little bit. Maybe he's not jealous. Maybe he just disagrees with you.
Yeah.
Right? So this is actually pretty common at work. Guys will say, well, I have this subordinate and he's not doing what he should and he disagrees with me and he thinks I should do this and that, or I have this level leader, somebody on the same path as I am, or even a boss who doesn't agree with me and thinks I'm doing it wrong, and he just saying that because he's jealous of where I am.
Yeah.
Maybe he's saying that because you are wrong, and maybe it has nothing to do with jealousy at all. Maybe you're just saying that so you feel okay with you being wrong. Or don't have to face the fact that maybe
Yeah.
you're not looking at this correctly. Be careful of assuming that other people feel a certain way. I mean, how many times have we done this with our wife, for example, right? Or
Yeah.
has she done it with us? My wife
Yeah.
will say, "What's wrong?" I'm like,
Why are
"Nothing."
you angry at me? Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, "Well, why are you being so quiet?" Nothing to say. Well, I mean, surely there's something wrong. No, there really isn't. Well, how was your day? Fine. Well, can you elaborate? No, it was just fine. Like there wasn't anything more to talk about. And so human beings have this tendency of trying to explain everything. Oh, well, Kip didn't talk to me this one way. Maybe he doesn't like me anymore. And maybe we call them cognitive distortions. Humans have the great ability to jump to the worst possible scenario. It's a defense mechanism. So we have situations that come up and we think the absolute worst. It's catastrophic. The apocalypse. The world is ending. And really, when we break it down, it just happens to be that, Kip, you had a bad day, so you weren't interested in talking, or you had something else you were dealing with, or it could have been any number of things that has less to do with ourselves than it does with the other individual. So be careful about assuming that you know how another person is feeling or thinking, because you probably don't. And it probably has very little to do with you, actually.
Yeah. And if there's tension, if you feel the tension, then you might have tension on your side that you need to address in some way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Last question, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Justin Fleshman, what do you think is the root cause of suicide? In the Air Force alone, we've had 83 this year. I know it's an issue on the outside as well, but we as society can't seem to get a grip on this.
It's a lack of meaning and responsibility. Outside of mental illness, I think that's the issue. And I think it has less to do with PTSD in military members and more to do with the fact that these individuals have lost their sense of purpose and direction. Because you're in the military, you have purpose, you have direction, you're fighting for what you believe, and we're not going to get into the discussion whether it is or isn't, but you're fighting for what you believe is the greatest cause that mankind has ever known. Freedom, liberty, democracy for all people. That's what you believe.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're not there anymore because you retired, you were medically discharged, you left the services for whatever reason. There's a million reasons. But now you don't have that anymore. And you wrap yourself up in this identity of being a soldier or a sailor or whatever, right? A Marine, whatever. And now that's stripped away from you. So you have no more sense of meaning, purpose, and responsibility. So you wake up each day without any clue of what you're going to do, no purpose or meaning to attach yourself to, no identity because all that's been stripped away from you. I mean, is it really a surprise that you're depressed and anxious and potentially even suicidal? I don't think it is. So what is the solution then? Find meaning and responsibility and purpose in your life. Find your next mission. If there are military members who are listening to this, first responders fall into this trap, I believe, as well, who are listening to this right now. If you have any intention, whether it's right now or in the next 20 years, retiring or getting out of military or your first responder services and obligations and duties, then it's your responsibility right now to begin to identify and look for what your next mission is. Those military members who get out and have purpose and direction and a mission outside of the military, from my experience, and this is just anecdotal, I'm sure there's studies that can back this up as well, but anecdotally seem to be doing better, are more fulfilled, more positive, and less likely to kill themselves. So the leading cause, from my perspective, is a lack of meaning, purpose, and ultimately significance. It's gone, stripped away from them.
And real quick, I think it's really easy for us to identify those other areas outside of the military that this same thing applies to. It's the high school athlete that built an identity about being the star athlete, and then high school's over and they're stuck in college and he's not that anymore. Right. He's just a mediocre college student.
Right.
It's the guy that loses his job and wrapped his identity around his job, and now he's not the executive anymore. In fact, he doesn't even have a job. So now his identity is lost and he's lost, quote unquote, his purpose. Like there are so many examples of this where we wrap who we are tied into our jobs, tied into our hobbies, tied into something. And when that gets taken from us in some unique way, we've lost our sense of purpose and a little bit of, like, I think, perceived value. That people love me because I was this, or I was this star, and that's why people enjoyed. And if you take that away from me, now I'm just mediocre, and they may not appreciate me, may not care or respect me the same way that they once did.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, man. Well, let's wrap this up.
Yeah, sounds good. So guys, once again, we fill these questions from the Facebook group. To join us there, to submit your questions to the AMA podcast, as well as just being part of that online community and having discussions. In fact, there was a few discussions just this past week that were kind of really solid. Although sometimes I'm a little hesitant, like maybe I was a little too harsh on that guy. Like some guy lost his job and he was like, upset that his wife wasn't supportive and whatnot. And so, but it's a great conversation, and there's an opportunity for you to have communication with other like-minded men, but there's also an opportunity for you to serve other men and have those discussions and rub shoulders with them. To learn more about that Facebook group, go to facebook.com/group/Order of Man. And of course, to join us in our exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council, you can do so by going to orderofman.com/Iron Council. We have a few events to kind of keep you guys aware of. For the first event is May 29th through the 31st. That is the Order of Man main event. To learn more about it, go to orderofman.com/main event. Originally, we sold out and we didn't have any more spots. Mr. Mickler was kind enough to work with Gatchko and figure out how
my infinite mercy.
Yeah, his
have
infinite
opened
mercy.
up more spots.
Yeah. So we opened up like literally as of like just a couple days ago, 20 spots, and now there's only probably 10 to 15 left. So those are just going to go just as quick as the other ones. And that's, once again, that's May 29th through the 31st. For Iron Council members, there's a dinner on the night of the 28th, orderofman.com/main event. And then the second event was our legacy event. This is, I don't even know what you call this, the ultimate experience for father and son, for boys between the ages of 8 to 15. And that's June 11th through the 14th. That's also in Maine. To learn more about the legacy, and we've had 2 different legacy events in the past. You can even jump onto our YouTube channel and probably search and find those event videos and kind of get an insight of what those events consist of. But those are life-changing events. Even from our perspective, just being a spectator and a participant was profound. And it's an amazing event. So if you're interested to go, even if it's not your son, don't let that hold you back. We had a couple guys in the last legacy event that I think one guy brought two of his nephews to the event with him. And so you do have some options. It doesn't have to necessarily be your biological son, but that's ages 8 through 15 though.
Yep.
All right. To support the podcast, guys, you can do it a handful of ways. Let's jump through these.
Let's skip that stuff. We gave them enough announcements. We gave them enough to do.
All right.
Order Man main event, Order Man legacy, and our YouTube channel. We appreciate all the support, guys. You know where to find us on social media. They can track us down.
Okay.
Kip, I appreciate you, brother. Guys, I appreciate you as well. Thanks for the great questions. Hopefully this was a great discussion and gave you some things to think about and consider. We will be back, of course, next week for another Ask Me Anything. But until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.